He had Lunacy available, and she did have Flow on curve as well, which, you know, skewers things a little bit, but she just chose to completely ignore Lunacy and just decide on that burn plan almost from turn 1.
Happy to see SuperFake on webcam here. I was slightly concerned with the name SuperFake and with that kind of low-res preview image that we have of him. I was wondering if he was just purely generated by an AI and wasn't a real person, but no, it appears that we do have a full functioning human being on the other side.
And the AI just decided to give him a literal name.
Yes, exactly.
Just very honest. It's like...
Yes. I said it was an AI. I didn't say it was a good liar. I mean, come on.
True.
But yes, SuperFake right now is not a human being that is currently capable of drawing the blue card on turn 2, which if he has aspirations of getting into Europe GM, Raven, he is going to have to work on those Incanter's Flow skills.
It is part of the entry exam. Something you guys don't know about. You might get enough points, but there's an exam afterwards, and it tests all the right skills. Here, though, just not much to do. Not really worth coining anything out, at least as far as I can see, right? The one card draw from Cram Session not achieving much. I don't think digging for a flow by coining Ruined Orb is really worthwhile. SuperFake, yeah, just gonna take a pass.
I don't hate it, you know. Right, okay. So way back in the day where you could hit both 2-mana high rolls when you had Flow and Lunacy, I made that play all the time.
Sure.
Right? Because I hate floating 1 mana, right? I hate having 1 mana, having a coin and just doing nothing with that mana. I feel like, you know, if you can cash that mana out and do something, it was powerful. And I know we've seen Alan do it, I think, post Lunacy nerf in APAC GM. Where he went coin Ruined Orb and hit the Incanter's Flow. So I do think there is some merit to it. And I do think SuperFake was genuinely, you know, counting through some potential curves with the coin and the way he's going to play out the game. But in the end, chooses to do the responsible thing. Just hold on for an extra turn, drop the Ruined Orb on turn 2 instead.
I did get a Mask for his trouble. So already chunks of burn appear in his hand here. And without the Flow, though, it's good to have the burn versus Priest, but you really do just feel that lack of Incanter's Flow, right? Because suddenly everything's just feels a whole turn slower, and if anything Priest wants, it's turns, right? Especially with this build, the slightly slower version with the Cthulhu pieces in there as well.
That is a miserable looking mage hand if I have ever seen one.
I think he just goes ring toss, right? Like, just tries to get Netherwind Portal, maybe Counterspell, but honestly, Mirror Entity, he's seen the studies get played by Ryoku.
Very possible, yes. Outside of that, there really aren't that many options. I mean, very few of the cards in his hand are even green, right? Even though they are technically castable for mana cost, so many of them actually need targets, and he does need to get some of these cards out of his hand so he can reactivate with card draw in the near future if he gets there. But having a hand that is no Flow, no Lunacy, and not even coin a Pexus Blast available on this turn, you've got to be considering that pretty unlucky at this point. It might just have to be a ring toss just to dig out of this.
The only other play I would give any respect to is Fireball Face. It's definitely not a good play, but it's one I'd respect. Oh, okay. Oh, I actually don't... which one did he pick there? I
think he took Mirror Entity.
It makes sense, wouldn't it? Yep.
SuperFake was starting to go full mild as this game had gone on, and quite rightly so. He's been extremely unlucky so far with his draw, and then his spirits quickly lifted when he saw the results of his Mirror Entity on the other side, because now this is no bother to deal with coming back the other way with the Devolving Missiles. Oh, okay, spoke too soon.
I think most importantly, not only did SuperFake gain the minion from the Mirror Entity, but his cards that you mentioned weren't even green are active now, right? He has things to do this turn that aren't just Fireball Face or something silly like that. So, yeah, even though this hasn't quite worked out smoothly, because the challenge is on board now with the whopping 10 health, he still just has active turns.
And he is dropping the Solarian here, which is unconventional, of course, because of the potential that it deactivates so many of the cards in his deck. But it was the only one that immediately curved with the cram session this turn without using the coin, which I think is what made it quite a tricky decision. I think SuperFake would have loved to have just seen Lab Partner, even Kobold Geomancer there, for example, just to be able to drop that cram session this turn. Because the Solarian might end up being a downside, especially now with Font of Power in the hand. Still no Apexis Blast been cast yet for SuperFake. But, of course, the Prime itself is an extremely powerful card. And there is nothing stopping you from drawing that one minion in your deck quite quickly and reactivating all the spell synergy cards.
And keeping hold of the coin is important, especially when Flow's not been played yet, right? The coin can open up some of these better turns, like Mask next turn, potentially, if this Challenger goes away.
The path is clear for the worthy.
Okay.
Bundle of energy, this boy, isn't it? Yeah.
On the written exam, there is a how emotive are you on camera?
Yes.
And you pass. Like, you failed the flow, but you got the points for the camera work, so good job.
Left. Okay, good.
Okay, very manageable board there now. The SuperFake.
Yep. Yeah, Combustion even lines this up very nicely with the +1 spell damage, right? Can even just be ping Combustion as a baseline play for the turn and then try and improve on that.
Trying to work out whether he wants to just get flow cast now, because he's already only hitting
fair.
16 cards.
Lab Partner is pretty insane, though. That now offering the +2 spell damage, potentially, even.
Oh, it says
You could still coin flow, right?
And still coin flow, indeed.
Looks good to me. Again, it becomes, although I mentioned the coin being valuable because there's not a flow, it becomes less valuable once you get into that, turn 7, 8, 9 mana, because you can play your power cards then.
Yes. Yeah, coining flow is generally worth it on almost any turn of the game. There was a weird, bad argument that Mars made way back in the day. I don't know if you remember this. He was one of the few players who
flow?
No. He was one of the few players who would coin Wild Growth without Shade of Naxxramas in his hand specifically.
Okay.
And he was asked about it in an interview, and he said, yeah, well, if you coin Wild Growth, you just have a coin every turn for the rest of the game anyway, which obviously doesn't mean anything if you're not spending that mana on anything.
I
right?
can
you've
hero
just
power.
Yeah, exactly. So, it was quickly pointed out to him that he was wrong on that occasion. Of course, Mars, one of the early legendary players of Hearthstone days past, but I think coining flow is a very different animal in most situations with this deck, and you can generally just go for it.
Well, Solarian Prime available for both players now in the deck, which makes this matchup get even spicier. And honestly, even though SuperFake's not really been off to a blazing start as Mage he wants to do,
Yeah.
he's putting a lot of pressure down now, right? He's got mass. He's got some spell damage there. He could even just trade these, make these trades with these minions to soften the board for that mask as well. He's got a discounted mask and a fireball in hand, so the plan's there.
All right, I'm on board. SuperFake for GM. I could get down with this.
Told you I'm okay with it. He
Yeah.
drew flow eventually, right? I mean, that's good enough.
Yeah.
Do you think he's weighing up the values of combustion fireballs?
I think that's exactly what he was weighing up. Yeah, that versus Mask even potentially, because, we're not really paying too much attention to it, but it's worth noting Ryoko is kind of just on 7 right now. Like, it's happened very slowly and bit by bit, but it's just minions stuck to the board, really, ever since that Dragonmore Skystalker, which we didn't even really address, right? Because, you asked, what was the secret? It's Mirror Entity. Yep, there it is. It's Mirror Entity. We didn't really talk about whether Ryoko should have just windmill slammed his big dragon into that unknown secret on that turn. I think ever since that moment, he's kind of been just taking a beating from that Dragonmore Skystalker on the other side.
Yeah, it was the fact that it was that into SuperFake having devolving missiles, right?
Yes.
So he completely negated the power of it on his opponent's side of the board. Here, though, again, Ryoku suffering from his his own priest tech to an extent, right? It makes sense to try and build priest in if you think the counters to priest are going to be the greedy options to put that Cthulhu in, but right now he's kind of just suffering from all these Cthulhu spells in hand.
I don't think SuperFake can quite believe just how winning he is right now, like based on the position he is in the game. Like, don't get me wrong, Priest is also very close to just swinging and stabilizing from this position, but when he saw 6 entire mana being spent on initiation there, I don't think he could quite believe that that was the strongest thing his opponent was capable of on that turn.
And now I think priority number 1 is going to be that Mask, unless there's something different coming out here. Okay, yeah, so it's got to be now, right? Mask this turn, hope it kills the minion and pushes, whatever damage. Then he has Fireball and Apexis Blast next turn. And with no minion on board for Ryoku, then it's going to be very difficult for him to, for example, get Apotheosis off. And if there's a Light Shower Elemental, well, he can just ignore it, right? He can just go face.
Yep. And having already dealt with 1 Light Shower and having dealt with it through Devolving Missiles, he knows the chances of another Light Shower are extremely slim. Have to be the other one naturally drawn from the deck!
And here we go. I would have played that Solarian Prime so fast. Because at this point, he simply cannot rely on a hero power in a dream right now. That's SuperFake. Mate, we've all been there.
He's rolling his eyes as if this is going to scam him, but, like, how? Like, lethal? 3 masks? Like, is that what's going to happen here? Because outside of that, I don't really see anything this Solarian could do that plays around his hand.
Yeah, I think most importantly as well, if there was... I guess he knows there isn't. I was just thinking, if there's like a Desperate Prayer in Ryoku's hand, he has that 1 mana spell, right, to block the counter spell and then go with the damage. So yeah, that's going to be game number 1, done and dusted. SuperFake, yeah, there you go. That's the one. He takes it with the mage, and that's Priest quickly dispatched in a strangely convincing fashion. It really was just that Mirror Entity pick, right? And the choice of Ryoku going for it, you know what, he got a secret, I'm just going to play my dragon, because if I hold it, then there's a chance if it's any other secret, right? I've just not played the dragon on curve, which would feel pretty bad.
Yeah, and I think Mirror Entity is increased in power even. I know we put a lot of testing in this matchup for GM in the early days, and played around with that a lot, because generally the idea as Priest, way back when, was to look for big dragons off Draconic Studies, right? And then land those on the board. They soak up mask damage. Even if they get Devolving Missile, they're generally of high enough mana cost that they leave a sizable minion behind afterwards. You still have a target for Apotheosis to build up. So we started to see that Mirror Entity became a very valuable pick on the other side. And I think that's only become more true over time, because now suddenly the rest of the deck is also very clunky, and there's these other mid-rangey minions in there as well, and you've got your South Sea Scoundrels and your Light Shower Elementals and the N'Zoth and the Mutinous and all of this extra, beefy minions thrown in that weren't necessarily there to begin with, giving Mirror Entity even more potential value against Priest. So it was a smart pick. It was a well-engineered situation to dig himself out of trouble from SuperFake as well, because it was a very, very, very bad start. Let's not forget that. On turn 4, I was sitting there saying, no flow, no lunacy, no coin Apexis Blast on turn 4. That's basically every good card. No Font of Power opening even, just to play for a little bit of minion tempo, right? So it was a very, very bad opening, and I think he did very well to dig himself out with just the single secret ring toss on that turn 4 to give himself some kind of game plan.
Yeah, really well planned there, and it paid off for SuperFake. He is going to move over to his Priest. Anything that's really standing out to you for this list? It's looking fairly standard as far as I can see, but I might have missed something.
Yeah, not really. Extremely similar to what we just saw on the other side, if not identical. It's the N'Zoth build, but it's not the incredibly greedy N'Zoth build that we saw perhaps a little bit in playoffs, where some of the players were expecting to get targeted with Control Warrior and Warlock, so they were building this very tech-heavy, greedy version of Priest, sometimes with N'Zoth and Cthulhu built into the same deck. This is kind of as, quote, slimmed down as a N'Zoth Priest gets, but it's still a very, very chunky, very mid-rangey, very expensive deck overall. But I think, very, very similar to what we've been seeing on the other side, and it's kind of going to be the story of the matchup a little bit, is the Priests actually getting to see play. And I did wonder whether Ryoku there during that series during that game was just kind of like, wait, I'm getting to play with my Priest. This is weird. I forgot this deck was in my lineup because I just haven't played it all tournament.
It's like, a
overwhelming
Cthulhu piece? Why did I put this in my deck?
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah, and now just looking at the shape of the lineups and what's left over, how do you feel? Like, let's just assume Priest can get a win. That might be quite a big assumption, but I'm just going to throw that out there. Priest is strong. It can do well. But how do you think the Shaman's going to fare looking at what he's got up against? He's got the Mage, the Priest as main targets, I guess, for that Shaman. Do you think he's got a good chance versus those two classes specifically?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, Shaman has an incredible win rate against Priest specifically in this tournament, over 60%, I think 63% overall, just looking at the stats, which as I glance as well, what I was about to say isn't entirely true because Warlock caught up again, but at a point where I last looked, that was around the rate that Warlock versus Priest was hanging at in this tournament, right? About 65%-ish, which we've talked about that being a free win matchup for Warlock for months and months and months now. Warlock did scrap a few wins together late on in the tournament, it seems like, to push up that win rate against Priest to 74%. But point being, very, very good matchup overall for the Shaman against the Priest specifically, and also a very good matchup against the Mage, it's worth saying, because I think one of the big reasons for the little drop in popularity for Spell Mage, yes, it got nerfed a little bit with the refreshing Spring Water, but I think more importantly, it just loses to some Doomhammer, and there's some Doomhammer around in the metagame right now, and I think that's a real problem for it to deal with. So I think Shaman has ended up being a great pick for this tournament, and I know there was a few people hanging around, Gallon, recent Blizzard employee being one of them, who was tweeting out earlier, like, where the Shaman players at? Like, surely this is the deck for the tournament. Right. Who are the ones to watch who are bringing Shaman? And I think that analysis has proven to be very correct.
Yeah, and just an additional note, something that definitely doesn't help is it's not even if you're expecting Shaman, you can tech the Mage for it, really, right? It's like you can't put
what are you going to do, play Ooze?
Yeah, exactly. the Doomhammers are hitting you if they're drawn, and Doomhammer gets drawn a lot. I did see, I can't remember the match, but earlier today, there was just one of those odd situations where Doomhammer just wasn't drawn, which is when the deck does suffer. It is a Doomhammer deck, even though there's the Elemental package, there's the spells and everything. It really does center around the damage you get from Doomhammer, and it has enough tools to dig that out of your deck that often is not the case. It's not like older versions of aggro Shaman where like some games you just don't draw it because you have to just naturally draw it in the past. Like there's a lot of ways to help tutor it, and so I was just talking about the games without Doomhammer are definitely an oddity as opposed to, oh, you know, that happens 30-40% of the time or whatever. Like when you don't draw it, it is quite a rare outcome.
It is, yeah, because it's not only the weapons that you're looking for, it's the Cage Match Custodians that then tutor the weapons, and of course you have the Primal Dungeoneers, which can then tutor the Cage Match Custodians, which can then get the Doomhammers. So there's multiple routes through the deck, as you were saying, but Raven, I see you recoil in fear as SuperFake right now is a whole mood as we move into this Priest mirror at my time, Raven, 9 a.m. after beginning this cast at 30 minutes past midnight. I'm here for it. We haven't had a Priest mirror on stream all tournament. I think 1 is about the right number, so let's get into it.
I can confirm I am not here for this.
Well, bye. I'll see you later.
I mean, is that an offer, Sol? Because I'll take you up on it. It's like, because I'll just go and take a half-an-hour break or so, and then I'll come back and see how it's going.
Tactical power nap, the exact length of 1 Priest mirror. Yeah.
Oh, but yeah. I agree with you in principle about the Priest mirror. I don't even mind the Priest mirrors in general. These Priest mirrors of the N'Zoth package and everything, especially with the Scoundrels, cycle through a lot quicker than some of the Priest mirrors we've had to suffer through in the past. But still, it's the 9 a.m. thing that's getting me. But let's dive straight in. Now we see, or I guess this is my question, is this where the Cthulhu tech for Ryoku is going to come in clutch? Because SuperFake does not have Cthulhu. He's playing that sort of slimmer version without all the late game extras.
It might be 9 a.m. You might not be full of enthusiasm for a Priest mirror, but your hosting instincts are still as razor sharp as always, honing in like a laser on the exact thing that I wanted to talk about. Because, yeah, in context, this is a huge matchup in the series, and it's where this incredibly greedy build of Priest from Ryoko can come into play, because, you know, SuperFake, it's not a hard target Priest lineup. It's not a if the Priest gets out of the series, I lose kind of lineup, but he is banking on picking up multiple wins against Priest. Like, don't get that wrong. However, his own Priest is just not as greedy as you might expect it to be in that kind of situation, which means the Priest on the other side, with the Cthulhu on top of the N'Zoth, on top of everything else, does now have the ability to take an edge in the matchup. It means SuperFake is going to have to be very, very tempo-focused overall.
And it's funny as well, because you can't even... I imagine some viewers that are, you know, maybe a bit less experienced would be like, oh, well, why wouldn't SuperFake play Cthulhu if he's leaving Priest up? But if SuperFake's expecting other people to see what he has seen, he's bringing a fairly aggressive lineup, or a lineup that can do well versus Priest. Like, the greed isn't going to help versus Shaman, right? For example, or Token Druid, for example. So it's one of those things where he would have expected other people to maybe go his way, and therefore he wouldn't have needed the late game tools. But
I also think it influences the ban decision as well, and we were talking about earlier, just to add another layer to that, when Ryoko is looking at the lineup on the other side and saying, well, okay, my Priest is a problem in this matchup. It struggles against the Mage, it struggles against the Shaman, it struggles against the Druid. How do I get it out? Well, I probably have to win the mirror match, and then you look at the mirror match and you think, oh, actually, the way I've built my Priest is actually probably a little bit favored in that mirror match. So if I leave the opposing Priest up, that gives my Priest a route out of the series, potentially, and that's exactly what he's ended up with here.
There are shenanigans afoot, though, Sottle. That shenanigan won.
Oh, yes, it is.
But also, although this might look really good for Ryoko, and it is, SuperFake also has now 2 Scoundrels and Raise Dead. So, yeah, we could start burning through the decks pretty quickly here.
We could indeed, but remember the edge that Ryoko already has in the first place, right? Where he has the fatigue advantage because of the 3 extra cards from Cthulhu to begin with, and then he's just picked up a whole extra South Sea Scoundrel for his deck anyway, off his own first South Sea Scoundrel. So even if SuperFake plays 2 Scoundrels, plays Raise Dead, plays 2 more Scoundrels, he's only gained 1 card back against Ryoko on the other side, who is playing 3 Scoundrels and started with a 3-card advantage in fatigue. So it's nowhere near enough to offset that advantage. That's a really big deal from Ryoko's side to pick up the extra South.
It is, but to add an additional layer, because we seem to be making an onion of this matchup, that yes, there's more cards because of the Cthulhu, but there's also a chance that if Ryoko doesn't keep a close eye on it, SuperFake could burn Cthulhu pieces, right? Which means, although fatigue will still be in Ryuko's favor, the Cthulhu win condition will disappear. So there's at least something to fight back, as both players seem to just be scoundreling each other to oblivion right now.
Mm-hmm.
Ryuko's like, I play the scoundrel. You play the scoundrel. Maybe I should play another scoundrel. just keep it going. What's he on there? 3, 6, 8 cards, so he is in that safety net of being able to not burn anything if it's played on Ryoko's side.
Yeah, SuperFake is fine, but for Ryoko, if he doesn't dump cards this turn, I think he'll be a little bit scared of what like Raise Dead into Scoundrel or the second Scoundrel itself will be. So that will probably prevent him from just playing out a Scoundrel this turn. He'll probably look for some more cards to dump instead. He can go with Second Renew and Ooze here if he wants to get some cards out of hand. Alternatively, it's just Gift of Luminance. Like he's going with the Renew route instead. He can just take a Desperate Prayer and dump it now as well as the Ooze, just to really open up some hand space preemptively.
It's tough though, right? Because by dumping the Ooze, it actually muddies the Raise Dead pool for him.
True.
At this point. So, although it makes sense, he's got the extra minion on board, he gets rid of an annoying card in his hand he doesn't want there, it is going to make the Raise Deads off the top a little bit worse.
Yeah, so he could even like play the third in that situation, was to take the Desperate Prayer, dump the Desperate Prayer just to get it out of hand and not play the right? And then still end up on 8 cards, but without diluting any Raise Dead pool that he might run into later on. Aren't Priest Mirrors just so interesting, Raven? There's so many things to think about.
Yeah, like I said, you know my slight dislike of Priest in recent history, but I will say that these N'Zoth builds I do like because I feel they're more active, right? Like you're doing more like proactive things as opposed to just sitting there and holding back and just answering anything your opponent does for eternity.
Well, that's 9 now, over on SuperFake's side.
Yeah, I think he just decided to blink first and just say Skeletal Dragon's a good enough card that if you spend 4 mana on a 5/5, you don't kill Skeletal Dragon. And yes, I'll burn cards, but while I'm burning those cards from my deck, I'm generating dragons in my hand. So it can be painful to do this, but I completely understand the plan.
Yeah, crucially, it does make life a bit awkward on Ryoku's side as well. If he wants to remain with enough hand space to play around more South Sea Scoundrels from the other side, of course, he doesn't necessarily know that there is the second Scoundrel in hand right now. Can't imagine he's going to be able to resist the urge, and he cannot. Yep.
And it gets so tricky in the mirror because, like, yes, Ryoku's going to burn a card for SuperFake, but look at the offerings. They can, like, 2 of them generate more cards. It's like, oh, so yeah, gotta take the Sethic. Makes sense. Luckily, he does have that Desperate Prayer that he can just almost throw away at any given point here.
Yeah. Just plays out the Sethic instead, holding on to the Desperate Prayer. Okay.
Scorpid Burnt for SuperFake, not the end of the world.
No. But it's just another card. It's another card deeper that he gets into the deck. It's just a whole card that he just doesn't get value out of. All of those small incremental disadvantages over the course of this game are not what he's going to want to be dealing with, especially when he starts the matchup at such a distinct disadvantage.
Yeah, I mean, just look at those 2 numbers on the right of your screen, right? 18 for SuperFake, 23 for Ryoku. That is worlds apart once we come down to fatigue later on.
And just talking about some more numbers on the screen, you can see SuperFake finished with an 8-1 record. There was no 9-0 in this tournament. There were no undefeated players. I think SuperFake and Bunny Hopper finished 1-2. Bunny Hopper taking first place in Swiss on tiebreakers. Newly re-promoted Grandmaster Bunny Hopper, I'll have you know. So already a huge achievement for SuperFake to get second place overall in Swiss in a stacked field.
I'll be honest. The fact that 2 players in the European region got, first and second, and we had more Europeans in top 16 in this time zone of a Masters Tour.
Yeah,
fair play, because I couldn't get past round 1. I don't think if I had to play. So I'm just like, yeah, all my respect, because obviously it's difficult for everyone else to play Masters Tour as well, but this time zone is especially filthy for the European region.
And big congrats, of course, to Bunny Hopper for being the first player to officially get re-promoted to Grandmasters, I will say. There was some kind of loopholes with Wama, I think, where he was re-promoted, but kind of just off the back of money that he'd already used to be promoted to Grandmasters once. And I don't know about you, Raven, but I just don't count that. I'm just choosing not to include it.
If I was in charge, I would have took the money to get in.
Exactly.
And then you can't have it back.
Yeah. So congrats to Bunny Hopper. I sent him a message when his promotion was confirmed, just said, I was never worried. And he replied and just said, I was. So yeah, congrats to him.
Yeah, fully understandable after how he was feeling towards the end of the season. But diving back into this game, SuperFake has taken control of the board now. And although there were...
I love this game.
It's
just the best video game.
Probably true. But yeah, although Priest has good ways of clearing boards generally, Ryoku just doesn't really have access to any of them at the moment. Hysteria would have been okay, but not great, not really developed much with the rest of his mana. So yeah, he's just going to develop behind it, generate an extra dragon, and he got a pretty good dragon at that with that Plagued Proto Drake.
Yeah, really nice, and really good hand management as well. I've been talking about the Desperate Prayer for the last few turns, thinking about the potential to dump it at key moments, and you can see how he has used that to his advantage, allowing him to play a South Sea Scoundrel, burn a card from the opponent, keep hold of that high resource card that he got himself with the Raised Dead, and then copy a resource-generating dragon while still maintaining 8 cards in hand, the perfect number to play around the South Sea Scoundrel burn on the other side, and that's all because he's been picking up a few dumpable cards along the way quite deliberately to be able to keep that hand size nice and low. So Ryoko playing the matchup very cleanly so far.
Things can potentially get very messy now, as Ryoko does have access to that Soul Mirror, and this is normally the rough size of board that you start really considering Soul Mirror. Oh, hang on a minute, maybe not. The Apotheosis is a little bit awkward, right, to ping the shield off?
I really don't want to Soul Mirror this turn, because you talked about the dilution of the Raised Dead pool earlier. Tell you what really dilutes a Raised Dead pool, Raven, and that is Soul Mirror. And I think with the amount of South Sea Scoundrels that have been played, there is nothing more game-ending in the Priest Mirror than just playing a South Sea Scoundrel every single turn. So while that Raised Dead is still hanging around, I think Ryoko will just keep this to a minimum.
Oh, okay, there goes Lucia. And yeah, I agree. I think I was initially looking at Apotheosis with Zyrella, but I think this Blade Master usage is just a lot better, so good job for Ryoko seeing that. I think my brain just went to the draw off the top. That was Elucia burnt there for Superfake as well, so again, Elucia can be a little bit trickier to play in current iterations of Priest in the mirror, but still not. You don't really want to burn any cards, never mind cards that can do some cheeky things.
Yeah, I will say, I think you saw Superfake give a big thumbs up. I think it is one of the worst cards in his deck in this matchup overall. It's influenced a little bit because there's a Cthulhu in his opponent's deck, which of course you can do some cheeky things with destroying your opponent's Cthulhu win condition by stealing one of their pieces. Very rarely happens though. The big problem with using Elucia at all in this matchup is that you always have this stacked hand of insane resources yourself that you never want to give to your opponent. So in order to use Elucia effectively, you kind of have to know that your opponent also has Elucia in their hand. So you can play Elucia, play some of their cards, and then end with their Elucia to do the double flip so that you can keep all of your cards. And you can engineer that sometimes with South Sea Scoundrel, right? Because you can force Elucia into both hands and then set that up. But outside of those kind of weird situations, I think Elucia is a card that you very rarely see used effectively in the mirror. So I think Superfake more than happy to have, more than happy to be playing a Priest Mirror in general by the look on his face right now, but more than happy to have lost Elucia as the particular card to that burn.
Yeah, and just a note for the Priest Mirror bingo. It looks like Superfake managed to Scoundrel the N'Zoth, so Ryoko has his natural N'Zoth in hand, and Superfake has a bonus N'Zoth. And if there's something that's going to dig him out of this mess he's in with the fatigue issue, with the Cthulhu issue, it's going to be being able to play multiple N'Zoth, right, and just pile on multiple waves of pressure, because right now, it's not been one of those games where the players are generating multiple Soul Mirrors as of yet, right? Which is normally just the card that can help fight back against multiple N'Zoth.
Alright, is it Raised Dead time? It looks like Raised Dead time. It sure is Raised Dead time. Only one South Sea Scoundrel picked up though. And now Ryoko has said, my time is over. I have to sit with 9 cards in hand this turn. It's first turn I believe he has done that. Which now gives an opportunity over to Superfake to start denying some cards from the opponent if he would like to, with that spare South Sea Scoundrel he's had lined up on the left-hand side of his hand for quite some time. But he also has pretty significant hand size issues himself. And so continues the dance of the Priest Mirror, Raven.
Yeah, speaking of dance, you know when people, there's like interpretive dance, right, where you try and tell story through dance or whatever? I think Superfake could do interpretive casting with just his gestures. If there's ever a need, I think he's got that covered, because he is just reacting to every single play this game, and it's kind of great. Okay, he gets the decent outcome from Hysteria, clearing the board. Great choices here. I think I would end up favouring palm reading, just to discover a slightly more impact spell than Apotheosis.
Yeah, I think I'm with you.
Again, I talked about Soul Mirror, like, it's something that's kind of been true of Priest Mirrors for the ages, right? Where,
Like Spider-Man web shooted at his opponent's deck there to try and destroy a Cthulhu piece. Didn't quite work. And,
But yeah, like if you can generate additional soul mirrors, that really does mix up the game, right? Because you can answer these high-value boards that Priest is generating in hand. About time to play some big minions. Yes, it is. Pro Drake coming down here for Roku.
Yeah, big minions seem reasonable. I think the palm reading choice there was also motivated because he actually has a lot of knowledge about the cards in his opponent's hand right now. Like I think he knows one's a dragon, he knows one's the N'Zoth because he put it there. He knew 2 of them were minions from the Raised Dead, right? So he knows it's not a hand stacked with spells in that position as well. That palm reading is going to give a bunch of discounts to. So I think that motivated the decision as well to just pick up a palm reading and potentially find some value himself. Both these hands, though, getting very clogged. This is really not the Priest Mirror of even like a month ago, right? Before N'Zoth became the really hot thing that everyone was playing. It really seemed like Priest Mirrors were just, 1-mana spells and Onyx Mage Scribes just over and over again a lot of the time. Right. But now you can see that the hands get clogged up with these expensive minions a lot quicker. Because it only takes 1 or 2 mid-rangey minions to come down and then die, and then suddenly they're in the Raised Dead pool and they come back again and so on and so forth, and the hands do get clogged up quite quickly.
And it's also an extended point into should these specific minions have been picked, because they might be the best minions in a vacuum, but because most of them are 6 mana, the ability to only really play 1 per turn does slow everything down, right, and make that hand size something to have to consider in a constant rate.
Wave of Apathy, kind of interesting here. It offers weird tempo pushes with the Hysteria.
Trying to see if there's a trade Zyrella clear here with Renew.
I must consider.
True, and there is, yeah, if you take the 5 damage on the Plague Proto Drake and then just heal it up with the Renew and the Hero Power. Ooh. Blademaster Samuro again with the Apotheosis in hand. He has got to think about what it means to give the Blademaster to his opponent, though, so he probably ends up, on the palm reading, same choices his opponent made. SuperFake is going to be losing 1 more card from his remaining resources.
Oh, yeah, snaps Soul Mirror, not even a question at that point.
What is happening? This hand is so cheap now. That was a disgusting turn from Ryoko.
Yeah, something's gone very wrong for SuperFake in this game, hasn't it? Because he was actively choosing to be weak to Scoundrel, but trying to make more aggressive tempo plays, right? But now he's behind on board and way behind on fatigue. It's all starting to unravel here, and I think some of it might just be because of the sheer just number of 6-drops he's had in his hand for most of the game and not felt in a position to play out. Because again, like, look at this hand, right? He can play 1 good minion this turn, and that's it.
I think a lot of it just goes to show how much initiative South Sea Scoundrels give you as well, right? Because they are just 4-mana 5/5s, which means that if one player is just playing a South Sea Scoundrel every turn, not only is that very frustrating when you're playing a Control Mirror and that's burning all of your cards, but it also means you have to deal with a 4-mana 5/5 every single turn, right? Before you can even start to think about playing out your hand and building up board presence of your own. So it just goes to show that, South Sea Scoundrel was a card that was slept on for quite some time. It's not like it's a brand new addition to the game, but it is something that we're only quite recently seeing have a significant impact on the competitive scene.
Kind of awkward hand here. Okay, he's just going to throw the Nazoth out. Everything else would have looked very strange, like Psyche split on the dragon on the other side of the board, like, and then Wave of Apathy maybe, or something strange like that, but...
Do you want to just wave here anyway? Or like Hysteria the 3/4 just to kill it into something, just to make an extra space in hand? Because you are going to generate a dragon this turn as well.
What about just Wave and Hysteria? Get it all.
Wow.
Just make some room.
Make some Ysera room even.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean, right? Otherwise, this Ysera's sitting there. There's still worries about what to do with the rest of the turn. He's going to gain that dragon you mentioned, of course, but just going to skip.
Just what we needed, an Onyx Mage Scribe. Felt like this hand was just lacking in value a little bit, Raven.
Right.
That solves that problem quite nicely. He has a 4-mana Psyche split in hand as well. Like, he can Mage Scribe Psyche split in the same turn. And Wave of Apathy to activate the second one after the Psyche split. He could play every other card in his hand and then immediately refill it all with fresh new spells.
Disgusting. SuperFake. Gone for that raised dead. I was just looking if he was considering the Soul Mirror, which is kind of funny because then he'd get his own Skeletal Dragon, which then creates another minion in hand.
Not move quickly.
I've only just processed that there's a Death Speaker Blackthorn on the board.
Yeah.
Of course there is, yeah. And a momentary process of, wait, how did that get there? And then my brain woke up and I figured it out.
It's a priest game. That's how.
Yep. Light Shower's now going to proc on both sides, undo some of the work that the trades did, but SuperFake does find himself ahead on board a little bit at the end of it all.
Until Soul Mirror the other way. Could even just double Soul Mirror. I don't think I've ever seen that.
What no, it's happened in a European GM Priest game, I think, Raven.
Did I cast that?
Yes, you did. I'm pretty sure.
Well, now I feel stupid because I don't remember. I thought you were about to say it was one from, like, a couple of years ago when I was doing APAC.
No? I'm surprised to see Soul Mirror used at all. I guess I don't really see better solutions in Ryoko's hand, but I think the one thing he has to worry about is just losing to a board, right? Just a board sticks that he can't deal with. And he does know there's multiple waves of Nazoth that have to be dealt with, right? Because he knows that SuperFake stole the other one from him, from the South Sea Scoundrel. So
Yeah.
I feel like maybe Soul Mirrors were a bit too premium, but having said that, I couldn't really see a better solution in his hand.
Well, also as well, if SuperFake goes for his Nazoth, well, Roku's board does well versus that, right?
Sure.
So I think I like this is just saying, well, one, you have to have the other Nazoth. You've just used Soul Mirror, so it's not like there's a great response as well, or a great response expected from SuperFake.
Is that the right target? I think he's setting up a Apotheosis Hysteria clear here. Yeah, but I was looking at the Blackthorn, whether that made a difference to how many trades, because it ends up with less attack, but I don't think it does actually too much. Still clears up a great deal of the board.
You've got some pretty solid trades there, just leaving the 3-4-3-3 there. Not too bad. Hysteria?
I'd just be Scorpid, honestly. I know we're going to get back into that conversation of does he really need more value, but probably yes. Like, he needs to find some way to weirdly scam this game, right? Because he's not winning it by conventional means. So I think the more boxes he can open, the better, because just the more chances that creates to do something spectacular this game.
I must consider.
Little bit awkward here that Roku can't cleanly kill this 5-5 without losing his own minions so far.
Remember, like, 5 turns ago when I said Ryoko just didn't have a good palm reading hand, and ever since then he's played like 6 copies of palm reading, and his hand is all just spells that cost nothing.
The casual 3-mana Soul Mirror now.
Yeah.
Quickly.
Howard Feast is pretty nuts here, honestly. I know the conversation we're going to have again, but he's going to take the Mage Scribe, Raven, I promise you.
I was looking at the Blackwing then, honestly.
I know you were!
Surely because the sheer fact I was looking at it is because it's not Onyx Mage Scribe.
Yep. Honestly, I think I could have got an AI to cast that turn between exactly what both of us were going to say at any given point.
Not lived until you put Apotheosis on that Blackwing.
I know.
Must consider.
The worst feeling in the world, right? When you're playing an aggro deck and they manage to stabilize just enough to play a runaway Blackwing, and then you have to make that horrible decision as to whether or not you have to trade into it.
I still remember the first time I did it, and I just assumed it would have dealt like 11 or whatever, because I just assumed it would just deal its attack. Yeah, I was like, wait, why didn't this heal me for more? It's one of those moments where you just don't even read the text more than once, and you just be like, I know what the card does.
SuperFake seems very amused by 0-mana Tent Trasher, which I will concede is quite amusing.
Will he be amused at a 3-mana Soul Mirror, though?
Probably less amused than he was by the 0-mana Tent Trasher, yeah.
Not that he even needs it, right? You can just
No,
go on its Mage Scribe, Body of Cthulhu, Scorpid the Skeletal, I guess. Although maybe you'd Scorpid the Elemental, because then you don't have to worry about, re-healing the trades on the board, potentially.
Looks like he is just going to clear out the board space, though. If he's making these trades, he is probably setting up the Soul Mirror.
Yep.
He will currently get everything but the Scorpid on his side. Again, the both Light Showers will go off and heal up the trades after the fact. Looks like Ryoko is momentarily disconnected, or one of the players is. Hopefully they can get back into it. Yep, looks like no real interruption there.
Oh,
Yep.
bye-bye.
Yeah, hopefully whatever is going on with the internet here does stabilize for the player, because that is a disgusting Zyrella clear. Yeah! SuperFake just managed to piece it all together. The combination of a soul-mirrored Light Shower Elemental and Zyrella meant 13 healing being proc there to deal the damage.
Yeah, suddenly Mutinous doesn't look so cool, does it, when you know your opponent's got about 30 minions in hand that are massive, and yes, that is more than they can hold.
Yep.
It's like, I got a good card. They're all good cards. It's like...
Not seeing it. Unless it's palm reading, go fishing, find an answer. Even then, Soul Mirror doesn't really make a dent in this board. And go with the Scorpid instead. Does find a Wave of Apathy.
Quickly.
Can at least stall.
What does
Best way to
when you have
use
to
that
face
stalling
down the
turn,
Blackwing?
I mean, that's true also, yeah. You got your wish in the end. He did get a runaway Blackwing, just not quite by the means that you were expecting.
I'm just disappointed because he didn't choose it.
No.
Yeah, suddenly the minions just don't keep up, do they? There's all of the value minions in hand, but some of them have been in hand for the majority of the game, right?
Yeah.
Especially I think the two on the far left especially have been sitting around for a long time now. Honestly, could just wave back and more of Cthulhu the Scorpid, right? And just go face and just say, okay, well, what can you do next turn?
Doesn't seem that bad. He could also just not even bother with the wave.
True, yeah.
Double dump. Yeah, I kind of like this, right, with the 2 Cthulhu pieces.
I guess the wave is a really good proc for this the double mage scribe, right?
Yeah. Yeah, again, I don't know when we're going to get to a world where Ryoku's hand has space for double mage scribe with Wave of Apathy, but we might just get there at some point.
In a world. That's the sequel. So let's get creative.
Yeah.
What does SuperFake have to do?
You're asking the big questions now, Raven.
I wonder.
I mean, the answer was he had to stick a board, but he's so far away from being able to do that. Like, against all odds is an out if he can find another Wave of Apathy now, but having just burned through one of them, which, you know, was essential, there's no way he could leave that board up on the other side. He's still some way away from being able to piece that together.
Got 2 words for you.
Death
Wing. Yeah.
When for me, when for you.
Gonna go fishing in his opponent's deck for an answer that doesn't really exist. And wow,
so
yeah, just
many-
like that.
Yeah, I was just about to say, there's just so many just layers of nonsense he has to fight through there. Like, even if he could deal with the board, then he has to deal with the fact that Ryoku's hand was just much better than his. Even if he's able to deal with that, then he has to deal with the fact that he was like 5 cards ahead in fatigue. Even if he could deal with that, he then has to deal with the fact that Ryoku has a Cthulhu and he doesn't. And he's already burning through all of those South Sea Scoundrels, which was a dynamic we didn't even manage to get into because we were so far ahead. There was a moment I thought about bringing it up where Ryoku was offered Insight. And I was saying, you could take an Insight here to draw the Cthulhu out your deck on the turn that you shuffle it in so that it can't be South Sea Scoundreled out of your deck to the opponent. However, there's now the dynamic that a minion in your hand can get punished by a Mutinous on the other side. So that doesn't make that, you know, a strict improvement anymore. But we were so far away from any of that mattering because Ryoku won the matchup at such a canter in the end that, you know, it didn't even feel like worth bringing up at the time. So here I am now, just filling some time bringing it up anyway.
It was even the fact that because Alusha was never going to be like super game winning at any real point, but just the fact that his Alusha was burnt early on meant that couldn't even just steal a Cthulhu piece and have that like small ray of hope of like, at least he can't Cthulhu me in this game. It's like, no, that wasn't even possible. So yeah, you are right. Unfortunately for SuperFake, he had lost that game on about every single level possible, but now he gets to switch over to a much more noble deck, the aggro shaman here, to maybe
a honorable deck.
a honorable. And the more I've seen it, I mean, I liked the shaman decks before we even started this Masters Tour, but the more I've seen of it this weekend especially, the more I've liked it, and the more I kind of lean towards this build myself, you know, not really the elemental heavy build, but that is honestly at this point just personal preference.
Yeah, I'm still really torn, honestly, personally. I really like the 1 Lilypad Lurker. I think it just has such high potential to just steal games out of nowhere. Then obviously you need a sufficient number of elementals to be able to support that, which leads to the other version of the deck. So I do think there's merits either way. I think this is a much more pure weapon deck. I think it's interesting because, you know, Hearthstone as a card game has kind of invented this genre of deck now where it is just weapon deck. I don't think it's really everyone's cup of tea, but it's just now we've seen it with Bomb Warrior, we've seen it with Weapon Rogue, Poison Rogue, even before that, arguably with your favorite deck of all time, Raven, Kingsbane Rogue, and now we see it with Doomhammer Shaman as well, where the play pattern's very, very similar. It's get this super powerful weapon rolling, and then pack the rest of your deck with cards that either supplement your damage or help you to clear boards so that you don't have to use the weapon to clear minions, you can just use the weapon to swing face every single turn over and over again. It's kind of a unique style of deck to Hearthstone that's, you know, keeps popping up over and over again and keeps potentially terrorizing metagames. And as I mentioned, Shaman now has replaced Priest in this Masters Tour as the highest win rate deck overall. So it's clearly doing a lot of things right for the players who have brought it to the tournament.
Yeah, and from what I've seen of this matchup we're going to have, which is the Shaman versus the Rush Warrior, that weapon is very much needed because you will lose on board at some point, especially this build, which isn't even the Elemental style, which has more of a board-focused minions that can fight back, but you will lose board, and I cast a game earlier where the weapon wasn't really got hold of at any good enough time, and it was just too late. The minions were on board for Warrior, they were pushing damage, and by the time the weapon was equipped and anything looked realistic, it was just too late. Not enough damage was pushed early, so it can be a tough one, this matchup. And just yet again, we go into a matchup where we're saying, oh, Rush Warrior is looking pretty good in this one, and I think quietly Rush Warrior has just been the star of this tournament so far, for me at least.
Yeah, it's been a little bit surprising to me. I was expecting it to perform well. I wasn't expecting it to be a problem deck in the tournament. But it has been operating at about 52 to 53% throughout the whole tournament, which is extremely good. Like, I don't think, people who don't necessarily play Hearthstone at a high level, when, if your deck has a 3% edge over average, right, in a tournament, then you're doing pretty well for yourself. Those are the margins that you kind of play around with. So, over 3,500 games Warrior has played in this tournament. A 53% win rate is very, very strong. And I do think it can create the right size of annoying boards to be able to deal with Shaman on the other side, because I think Dunk Tank is one of the best cards available to Shaman in a lot of positions, and generally the Warrior minions get too big for that to be dealt with, so I do think the Warrior has a lot of game to come back against the Shaman here.
As we're already kicking off this game, what do you think of Naralax in Rush Warrior? Ryuko's not the first player I've seen, and not even the second player I've seen include this at the moment, and I just can't really make my mind up on it because I see the value, but it could just be a minion that hits them in the face now, is the way I view it. So, I don't know, I'm kind of torn.
Hits them in the face one turn from now. This is Rush Warrior, not Charge Warrior, Raven. Let's be real.
Not the way I play it, but yeah.
What? You cheat? I don't understand.
Leroy? It's like...
Yeah. I am a Naralex gamer, Raven.
Okay.
Low-key. When we first got access to the mini set, as you know, I was just slamming Naralex in every single deck, and I've moved away from that a little bit, but I do think it offers a lot of power in particular decks, especially when those decks are quite one-dimensional, as Rush Warrior is. It just offers that X factor, right? Fear factor for the opponent, particularly in a tournament situation where making your opponent do bad things, play badly to play around things. This goes back to the old George C interview, right, where he was talking about faking out the opponent by just putting Leroy in every deck so they play badly and play around things that they shouldn't do. Suddenly, if you just played Naralex, maybe they play around Dream, maybe they play around Ysera Awakens, or maybe they don't and you just hit that one outer, right? It just introduces that little X factor to proceedings, which makes people have to think about a few extra layers.
Yeah, one reason I actually, or at least a positive I have for it, is Nightmare is actually very useful in this Warrior deck. One for Blade Master, fantastic, obviously if you need a board clear, but also the one thing the deck does lack, unless you me apparently, is that burst damage from hand, right? So you just have that sort of surprise Nightmare that just comes out of nowhere for extra damage. It can make a big difference in these matchups.
Interesting.
What was I saying about SuperFake not playing the Elemental version? just Super Shrine portals and gets one anyway.
Yeah, without any of the effects, his Elemental has the Crab Rider treatment here, where it just kind of comes down as a 2/5. Speaking of which, I think Ryuko would have vastly preferred a Crab Rider of his own off that stage dive there, because the resulting bumper car is very awkward this turn in terms of not being able to clear and also mana efficiency. I was kind of curious that this wasn't just a straight up Naralex turn as well, by the way. Just start to try and generate some options from that. Allows you the out to just curve straight into the Emerald Drake, start putting a lot of counter pressure potentially back on your opponent.
I think it's just scary, excuse me, because Rush Warrior can't really recover health right? So I think against this Shaman, it's just all about, guarding as much as your health, even from the very early turns as possible, because if these minions start chipping away, suddenly a Doomhammer equipped on curve, you think, oh no, followed by Rock Biter, and you're just dead. Whereas if you could have saved 2, 4, maybe 6 health throughout the course of the first 5 turns, maybe that buys you enough time.
But at the same time, Raven, it's not like this is Control Warrior, right? Like, it's not going to play Shield Block and Justicar Trueheart and start gaining a ton of armor. Like, you're going to win this matchup by building a huge board at some point, right? So it feels like the best way to do that is just to be mana efficient and start playing your stuff, because even if you look at the outs to kill the 2/5 that turn, they were incredibly slim, right? Like, was it just Crab Rider in terms of protecting health off the stage dive immediately that turn, whereas everything else could have ended up very awkward, because you can get unplayable minions right off the stage dive if you draw one that's too expensive. So it seemed a little bit ambitious from my perspective.
Here for a good time. Here for a good time.
Roku now building up the board of his own and bringing down that must-kill minion, the Playmaker, right? Like, SuperFake just has to respect it. He doesn't know what's coming next. He knows that there's 2 rush minions guaranteed. He knows one's Dark Moon Rider, but he knows there's 1 mystery rush minion that, again, once turn 5 hits, those can be very impactful. Like, if it's a Runthack, for example, would be insane and maybe even game winning at that point. So no surprise whatsoever to see SuperFake respect the Playmaker. Can I just keep it simple? Storm Strike, put 3 damage to the face.
Yeah. Crucially, gets a spell cast that turn as well, so he's now activating the Torrents on the follow-up. He also has the potential to overload immediately if he wants to be throwing out a landslide at any point. So I don't think he's too worried about keeping control of the board for significant amounts of time. And this is why it's calling this an aggro shaman is kind of a misnomer in my opinion, because you see how effectively it's being a control deck right now, right? And just biding its time, dealing with the boards as they come down, just waiting for that opportunity to pull the trigger on dealing damage the other way.
Yeah, that's fair. I do think there are other aggro decks that play like that in a lot of matchups, right? You just want to buy the time. But this is unique, I guess, in the fact that it has the insane potential damage of Doomhammer, right? Because there's not many decks that have access to that in just such a small level of combo. Here, though, we're going to see if where SuperFake wants to progress this game, because he has a lot of options as to what he wants to do. He could just landslide Torrent and just like hero power and just say, well, fine, it's a bit of a rough turn, but it stops all this damage coming through from ETC. Also go Inara, but I think that is just way too rough and not enough of a payoff considering how powerful that card actually is, even in the late game.
Yeah, I agree. You're almost obligated at that point to like throw both attacks into the ETC.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is the play I end up liking. This is the play I was alluding to before, where he has that Novice Zapper just to be able to say overload immediately so that you can throw out the landslide. It's kind of just an interesting niche of when you are overloaded cards, right? Whereas it counts the turn that you overload and the turn that you are then overloaded as proccing the card. So you kind of have a little bit of flexibility about it that way. That's why he was holding on to that card for some time, to be able to throw that pairing together. Resisted the temptation to just play it out as a Flame Imp early on in the game, which I do like, just held onto it for a key moment, since it is such a great proc specifically for landslide, hitting the overload and the extra damage to the AoE. It's almost as if, Raven, those 2 cards were designed to work together.
Almost.
Yeah.
After seeing that landslide, I think Roku would be tempted to actually retain both minions on board with the opposite trades that he actually ended up doing. It is tough, though, because making your sort of beefy minion, this 10 Trasher, a 5/2, makes it significantly more killable just in general. So I do understand his play in the end. It's just something to consider when you've just seen a landslide spell damage come out.
Yeah, and I think he still has a read on Doomhammer, or on a power 5 drop anyway, right? Because if you look at his last 2 turns, the last turn he spread wide and made this very annoying board that said, if you want to play Doomhammer on 5, you're going to have to do some weird things with your attacks because of the shape of my board. And then I think his choice of trades here kind of follows up on that, right? Because if he were to leave a minion as a 5/2, then suddenly Doomhammer can just come down and deal with that very nicely, or Inara can come down and deal with that very nicely. So I think just leaving it as one big minion just continues to play around that big power card out from his opponent.
Yeah, and although it feels very slow, I do just like the torrent here from SuperFake, right? Keep it simple, get rid of the minion. Very nice little nod there to not play more minions. You almost feel weird to not hero power there, but he doesn't want to give a minion to rush into to get a benefit from, say, Runthak or anything like that. He just doesn't want anything to benefit Roku because his plan is piecing together now with Inara and like Diligent Note Taker, Rock Biter, like, oh, so much damage. Can't do it all in one turn, of course, but
I think you can just go, right? Like, you know your opponent's hand is one minion that's been stuck there the entire time, right? So it could be Troublemaker, could be Alexstrasza, but it's probably one of those two with just how stuck it's been in the hand. And a Dream card, right? So if you just play Inara Rockbiter this turn and deal 10 to face, it's actually quite unlikely that your opponent can deal with the Inara because Troublemaker would have to hit it with both of the 3/3s in order to be able to clear it. And obviously Alexstrasza would be unplayable, so it would have to be like a top-decked Rush minion in that position, or Dream, or Ysera Awakens coming off the Dream cards.
interesting. I was looking at potentially just in our torrent the 1/4 and maybe play the Zapper, but yeah, I think you're right. The more I look at it, the more I just think like the Crab Rider just doesn't do enough to warrant the time, right? So yeah, deal 10.
Take 10, idiot. Not quite as cool as the Mordresh version.
Ooh.
That's not it. That's not it. It lives. It lives. Yeah.
No.
You are right. It lives.
Is there trouble?
I'm having a good time, Raven.
Same. And again, just an Emerald Drake, which isn't a bad outcome when you play this card on curve, but right now, this is not what Ryoku needs.
Just 1 damage off.
What to do?
I mean, he can actually just go for the Doomhammer this turn, right? That just looks better to me. Doomhammer, swing, and then have the Rockbiter Diligent Note Taker turn next turn seems very reasonable. Because I guess the only thing he's thinking about is Torrent won't be live next turn if he does this.
Little time.
But there's true.
Repeat that.
Yeah, okay.
I'll write that down.
This gives him more options, right, as well? Because now he can do the Doomhammer Rockbite Torrent next turn.
Right.
This is just better. Because the one thing you want to be able to do is just remove a taunt, right? And just get rid of it no matter what happens. Eat the weapon, quick!
And the cycle of life.
Defensive Alexstrasza is the card that most importantly needs to be played around here. And that means, once again, 1 single point of damage off lethal, but the Donk Tonk off the top is going to be that crucial damage. Even gets the juicy corruption in, able to fire it at face. And that is going to be SuperFake going up 2-1. Shaman gets out the series at the first attempt, continuing its stellar win rate in this tournament, showing again that it has been the bring so far to Masters Tour Dalaran, and is putting SuperFake 1 game away from a top 8 performance, from a Championship Sunday appearance.
Yeah, and even at that point, without, he got the Dunk Tank, right? Lethal, great. There's a lot of burn in the deck. But even with the Torrent, right, he could have easily just killed Alexstrasza, pushed some more damage, and then just carried on the game and not been dead, right? It's not like he had to win that turn. So he was still in a decent position after that. But yeah, he did get the damage, and I think SuperFake piloted that very well. There were some kind of awkward decisions to make there, and ones you could easily trap yourself with, right? And maybe play the Anora differently. That last turn there, opening up the torrent, and maybe some more mana available for the turn after as well. So yeah, really like his play here, and yeah, it's paid off for him. Goes up 2-1 now.
Yeah, I will say, first and foremost, the Alex Strasser was a 10-10, so it was a little bit trickier to clear than you might be making out in that spot. But still, there was the minions in board that could have eventually taken care of it. But I do agree with you in general that the game was played very well, and I think patiently as well from SuperFake, which is the crucial point there, because I think some novices with the Shaman deck they'll get frustrated early on because they'll be like, well, you know, I don't draw Doomhammer every game by turn 5. Like, how do I win? I just don't have Doomhammer in my hand. How is this possible? But the deck can continue to stall for quite some time, just role-playing as a control deck. You do have Primal Dungeoneer to keep digging through your deck and keeping your resources high. Primal Dungeoneer finds Cage Match Custodian, then finds Doomhammer. Like, you have so many ways to be able to continue to dig and continue to stay in the game for extended number of turns. That I think patience is key, and even though it was only 1 or 2 extra turns that he did need to stall for there, I think SuperFake demonstrated that patience very nicely.
Yeah, and that could be highlighted as well. If you want to go back and watch the VODs of what we had today, Dead Draw versus Baby Bear, it was Shaman. I think, yeah, she was playing the Elemental version, but very similar, versus Priest, and Dead Draw must have healed for 30 plus easily that game, and up until the moment she lost, she still had a chance, right? There were draws that were still going to make it possible to grab the win, and this was turn after turn after turn of healing, and the game just kept going on, and there was never a moment where I think like there was a consideration, oh, Baby Bear should just concede, she's lost. It was very much like, no, there is a chance because the damage just keeps on rolling. But diving back into this one, SuperFake only 1 game away from that top 8, as you mentioned. Gonna have falling back on his Priest now as the last deck. And what are you hooing about, Sol? What's going on?
SuperFake looks oddly unhappy with the hand that he hit off the mulligan there. I was about to go into this spiel, Raven. First and foremost, this is not the spot that you want to be in. We talked about how SuperFake's off-the-wall lineup has forced Ryoko into doing weird things like leaving up Priest. I don't think he's leaving up Priest by choice like SuperFake is on the other side. I think he's being forced into doing so. Evidenced by the fact that right off the bat, here he is playing an incredibly sucky matchup, right? Rush Warrior going up against Priest. However, things have changed a little bit from a few weeks ago when the Priest deck was very slim, very light, always had things to do, always had plays on curve, and had masses of AoE in the deck, or ways to generate additional AoE, right? Now the deck is a lot more minion focused, as we keep pointing out, which means there is a little window for Rush Warrior to just build boards and get under the clunky mid-range hands that this Priest can have. However, SuperFake just hit the goods in his opening hand, in my opinion. His 1 Condemn, the Blademaster Samurai, which is such a crucial card in the matchup, and then the best card in the matchup, Soul Mirror, because Soul Mirror just eats this deck. It basically makes Troublemaker unplayable on the other side of the board, because just straight up Soul Mirror is a devastating tempo swing against an opposing Soul Mirror. Not to mention all of the other board states it can shut down. So to me, SuperFake mulliganed into a pretty nice opening hand, but he looked disappointed with the results of his mulligan.
Yeah, and it's not as if he's even had bad draws to follow up with either, right? The choice of Scorpid or Palm Reading looking pretty good. Seems upset with this choice as well. What do you think he was actually looking for? Do you think it was just eyeing up at a potential apotheosis purely because Blademaster's already in hand?
I'm starting to think this might just be general anguish with the situation, right? Like he's processing how close he is to a top 8 and what that means for, you know, potential Grandmasters moving forward and so on.
There is that mindset where if things aren't going perfectly, you think you're going to lose. Right, like there is that kind of thing when you're in these kind of situations. So
it's true. So honestly, I think Draconic Studies is a pretty premium option there overall, in terms of just finding another mid-range threat that you can drop down, even discounting the Deathwing even further, which I'm amazed we've got this far without you pointing out straight away that SuperFake was a Deathwing gamer.
It's because it's a bad choice, Sol. I understand SuperFake's game plan, right? It's a board clear versus anything, but he's not considered the Murloc.
I mean, yeah, point made. Yeah.
What does he do when it gets gobbled up? That's the problem.
What you gonna do, brother, when Mutinous goes wild on you?
Some musical quote, I don't know.
That's Hulk Hogan, my dude. That
Is it? I thought it was
not a musical
I thought it was
quote.
some song. I just always assume it's lyrics with you, Sol. You're normally predictable.
Right up until I'm not.
This is also a bonus of that, as you were mentioning a little bit more seriously now, that Draconic Studies is outside of maybe exactly this Tent Trasher.
Yeah.
You can land an early enough bigger minion than Rush Warrior can, right? That makes them have to then start trading into it. Then the Priest has buffs and whatnot. So this Tent Trasher was one of the few things Ryuko could have done to keep up with this play from SuperFake.
That's the goods, though. That conditioning helps out a lot. This hand is incredibly clunky on Hiroko's side, it has to be said, but honestly might not be the worst thing against Priest, because we can see if he'd have just been curving out with his nice little Gnarg into Bumper Car or whatever, like that would all get shut down by Blade Master or Condemn at some point anyway, right? Like it's having these big beefy late game threats that might just actually give Ryuko a chance in this matchup.
Ryuko just considering this trade, right? Or lack of trade, maybe, that he's going to go for. But there's that constant fear, and it is horrible, of thinking, can I let a Priest have a minion live on board, or a big minion on board? If I do, what could go wrong? And normally it's everything. Everything could go wrong. Of course, he couldn't clear the whole thing off, and there's still the 3-4 that lives.
Interesting. Chooses to raise dead very specifically for those two minions. Expect we're going to see a Condemn come down here if the Scorpid doesn't offer any alternative option, because I don't think he can really afford to let this playmaker live.
Yep, normally a must-kill target, right?
Yeah.
One of the options, I guess, Shadow Word Death would alter that plan, right? Because then you can retain the 3-4 on board.
Indeed. Ooh.
Oh.
Power Word Feast is one off, unfortunately.
If he asks nicely, maybe the Scorpid will let him pick Feast and Focus One.
Which would be ideal, yeah. I do like taking an alternative option there from the Scorpid, though, because it then potentially preserves the Condemn in hand. Condemns are extremely powerful cards. He's just going to go ahead and use the Condemn anyway, though. Okay.
I guess he has a second Condemn, he has a Soul Mirror, he has the Samuro. Like, he probably feels like he's got enough for the near future. I mean, he has the Deathwing, the ultimate board clear.
I tell you what, Raven. He might... You said it was a bad pick, but maybe SuperFake is just playing 5D chess here, and he's taken the Focused Will to play around the Mutinous eating his Deathwing.
See,
You ever think about that?
well, honestly, Sol, have you thought about you just proved my point that Deathwing's just always good? Geniuses pick it. So, point proven. It's a good point, though. Does negate that issue. And obviously, without talking about Mutinous, Deathwing is a good pick, right? You would discard however many cards you need.
Yes.
You just obliterate a Rush Warrior board. Look, SuperFake, it could have been worse. Could have been the Deathwing. Now, what about a Sethic turn here with this, starting with this Focus Will? Looks pretty good.
It's pretty strong, right?
Plenty of mana to mess around with. Not the end of the world if this Murloc ends up living after the fact, because it will only have 4 attack.
Yeah, the problem is if the first spell you get doesn't immediately reproc, right? Like you kind of need to chain specifically off the Sethic, which, as Miracle Priest players will tell you, is not hugely likely right now. You generally do want to have multiple spells or multiple Sethics to go off with, so I think he's going with the Venomous Scorpid here, looking for extra spells to be able to proc that Sethic with. But still having not seen it, there is still, of course, the opportunity to just go for that Sethic turn anyway. That is still very available to him.
Quickly.
He's just going to go max stats on board. I can't help but respect that.
Now we're cooking.
Weapons for my master!
Playmaker not... I'm not going to say not adding anything, because you can actually get the double tent trasher now.
Yeah.
Just nothing lines up that well is the problem, right?
Yeah. And this is the dynamic I talked about earlier, where it feels like Troublemaker's a powerful card here. If you at least hit that 1 in 3 once, and you feel great about it. They feel great about it, but you know the threat of Soul Mirror is so real. Soul Mirror is just such an enormous tempo swing here.
Even better now, Soul Mirror and Condemn.
Yeah. I mean, you can even just preserve it, right? You could just, like, Soul Mirror, take the trade even, and use the extra mana to heal up his own minion. He can
Sure.
Soul Mirror. You can even Soul Mirror Apotheosis if you really wanted to go in deep. Like, whatever he does, he's Soul Mirroring this Troublemaker, because that is just the play in this matchup. It's so outrageously punishing.
Yeah, I will say I think I like holding the Apotheosis purely because Blade Master sat there, right? It's just that thing of if Ryuko gets hold of the board or goes wide again, he has the ultimate reset answer, being able to clear up a ton of those early minions, because it's not like now Ryoku sat on a huge hand for conditioning, right? His hand's relatively small.
SuperFake just directed his ruffians to go face, as if there was anything else they could have done that turn. Like,
Stop my work!
and with 5 damage in play, and with an Apotheosis in hand, SuperFake, after an incredibly entertaining debut, is going to march through to the top 8. And unfortunately, Ryuko, we barely knew you. We hardly had the time to get to know you, but a strong top 16 performance by the Japanese player there. Obviously, one of multiples of that contingent who have made it to top 16. So a strong performance, but obviously the star of the show so far, SuperFake, with a great lineup, a very entertaining set of theatrics on camera, and some really, really solid play overall as well.
That's what really... what really stood out was the camera work. But speaking of the gameplay, yeah, I agree. I think the thing that really shined here was just solid understanding of each matchup, right? It's like he knew exactly what to do. He knew the limits. He knew how far he could push certain decks, especially that Shaman. So, yeah, I'm excited to see him play tomorrow. And I'll be honest, SuperFake, not a player I know too much about before right now. But just this is what I want to see more of. So I'm really excited to see what he can do in this tournament. And even if his road ends at top 8, I think he has already made his mark, and I'll look forward to seeing him play in the next Masters Tour, because I just want to see what he does next.
Yeah, and just to highlight the solid play, just going even down to that last moment there where I was still stuck in a very defensive mindset, because it's generally a defensive matchup for the Priest. But he recognized, throw out the Condemn. You don't need to preserve it. I don't need all these AoEs. Throw out the Condemn to push 5, because then with the 5 plus the 6 from the Ruffian minions coming through and dealing damage, as he directed quite clearly to go face left and right,
like
he then had... Yeah, exactly. He then had the threat of lethal with the Apotheosis to follow that up if he just stuck 1 minion after that point, which is exactly what he did. So yeah, really, really clean performance. Great start to the top 16. Very much looking forward to seeing how the top 8 develops now.
Yeah, pretty cool. There are only a certain amount of hours in the day, though, and that means that the other top 16 matches have already happened. So let's check out the bracket and let's see how everyone has fared. It looks like Oka Shinsuke has took a victory. Rekvam going to be against him in that first match. Keidai Bao versus Shumu. SuperFake versus Lee, Omega Zero versus Gabby. Wow, China coming out strong here. So in this Masters Tour, I'm impressed.
China coming in huge, yeah. It looks like we are saying goodbye to Bunny Hopper. Don't really get to see him have his swan song. The first place Swiss curse strikes again, Raven, as Bunny Hopper did finish out in first, but then went out in top 16. But take a look at that name all the way to the bottom. We can talk about China coming correct to this top 16, but the boy, the Child King himself in Gabby, is finding himself with still a spot to repeat the insane achievement of